Hi, I'm Sarah with Louisiana Right to Life, and I'm here tonight to talk with you about the prevalence of abortion and families that face economic and social challenges. Maybe that's a mouthful, so let's think of it this way. Have you ever heard someone tell you that women need abortion because without it, their children will grow up poor, probably end up in foster care, and go on to have difficult lives? That argument is one I've heard countless times among abortion proponents. It's my view that it's exploitative to use the difficulties of women and kids this way to justify abortion violence. And I don't say that without my own meaningful experience with it. So let me start tonight by telling you a little bit about my mother's pregnancy and how my own childhood pain actually strengthened my pro-life convictions. In the late 1980s, she found out that she was pregnant for the 7th time, and this was impossible news for her. She lived on government assistance, and her children that she already had were barely surviving. She worked as a part-time maid in the city, and she faced difficult challenges because she was an immigrant from Honduras, and she came to America as a child. Coupled with her financial situation, she wrestled with her mental illness, paranoid schizophrenia, which is a type of psychosis that makes it difficult to function. These circumstances led her to seek the help of a New Orleans abortionist with her pregnancy with me. At 26 weeks, the abortion doctor delivered me breech. He told my mother that I'd be a mental vegetable incapable of having a normal life and advised her to let me die on the table. Thankfully, she resisted him and told him that she would sue him if he didn't get me immediate medical attention. She is the reason why I'm here today, because she stood up and fought for my life despite the circumstances she was facing. After that, I was sent to Children's Hospital where I recovered until I went home. I was placed into foster care for the first time at 16 months, and I spent almost 8 years in foster care prior to my adoption at age 9. I was adopted by an amazing Louisiana family. During those almost 8 years prior to my adoption, I got an up-close and personal look at the social and economic problems that lead women into an abortion facility. My family saw it all, from external societal problems like racism and economic inequality to internal ones such as parental abuse, neglect, substance issues, and even domestic violence. And while experiencing and watching it unfold in my family was incredibly painful, it gave me 2 rare gifts, with the first one being able to tell you right now that despite it all, I'm so glad to be alive, and that ending my life in abortion would not have solved my family's problems. The suffering I experienced was temporary, unlike abortion, which is permanent. Secondly, my experience helped me understand why women have abortions in the first place. We have to bridge the gap from understanding and compassion to developing creative ways to support women, enabling them to make a different choice than the violence that abortion brings, such as adoption. So let's take a look at the characteristics of an abortion-minded woman. For this, I see my mother as a type of prototype, an example. Like my mother, women who choose abortion are often economically poor, women of color, women experiencing domestic violence at home, and women who have chosen abortion before. Here are those facts.
I've in the pro-life movement have heard this. Women have abortions because they want to finish school. They want to get married. They want to leave the relationship they're in. Those are true things. Those are situations. Those are true situations for women. But statistically, women of color, minority women, are more likely to have abortions than white women. If you can see my little chart here, this is per 1,000 women. So if you're looking at the African American community, 27.1% of abortions occur per 1,000 on African American women. 18.1 and then 16.3, all higher numbers. Hispanic community and then other, all higher than the white community. So that's going to tell us something about abortion. And what we know about racism and what we know about systematic racism, what I know about it, is that it looks different than you might imagine. It looked like, for me, this is what it looked like in my family. My mother was Hispanic. People looked down on her. People rejected her. Like that story in the pharmacy. They didn't give her medication. And it's because she didn't seem like a quality person that someone wanted to they didn't give her dignity. They didn't give her time. They didn't give her attention because she was a different color than them. She looked different. She was mentally ill. These things did matter in her life. So we can't say that, racism has nothing to do with this, because it does. Because obviously, this is from the CDC, okay? And I know the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, does have data wrong at times. But the point is, the overarching point in my mind is women who choose abortion are more likely to come from minority communities, and they're more likely to come from poor communities. And that should tell us something. That should tell us that they're in a place of desperation that we need to look at. So that's why I put that little chart up there for you. Here's another statistic from the CDC. And this data here adds up to almost 80%, okay? So below the federal poverty line is almost 50%, and 1 to 2 times the federal poverty line is 26%. So I'm gonna round, okay? That's 30%. So this almost 80% of the abortions that take place occur in poor families, in families that are struggling economically. So what does that mean for you? What does that mean for you? Because we say we want to end abortion, but the way in which we end abortion is complex in my view. It's thinking about the poor woman. And one of the things that I wasn't able to get into also earlier was, my foster mom was friends with my adopted mom. My birth mother was friends with my foster mom at a time, for a period of time. And even when I wasn't in care, my foster mom would come to our home and bring like a little hygiene bag, toothbrush, toilet paper, things that kids need. And she brought that for all of my siblings. She threw birthday parties for my siblings because they didn't have birthday parties. She bought them toys. That was what she could do for them in that moment, of time. She couldn't adopt all of them. She couldn't rescue all of them. She didn't have that. She wasn't a superwoman. Like I said, she's a kindergarten ESL teacher, right? But she showed up for the poor. That's what she did. She showed up for them. And I think we need to show up too. Because the reason I am as pro-life as I am is because there was no hypocrisy. You see, there wasn't hypocrisy in her. She didn't not care about my birth mother. She loved my birth mother. Now, unfortunately, my birth mother rejected my foster mom later on in life. But I saw her, my foster mom, later my adopted mom, her love for my birth mother. Also, I mentioned briefly the domestic violence link, but I found this out interestingly enough myself recently when studying this. This is the first time I even realized this, that almost 40% of women who've had abortions have a history of physical violence in their own lives. And I think it's good in context to think about, we think of domestic violence as, we think of it isolated. We don't think that women who seem more stable and affluent can experience domestic violence, but that's not true. All types of women can experience domestic violence. So you got to think about that woman who is in a crisis pregnancy because she's being beaten by her husband or emotionally abused by her husband. You have to reach to her in a way that's real and personable, and you have to be in her life and say, you can do this. We will provide you what you need to get out of this situation with your husband or your partner or your boyfriend, whatever it is. Women who have had abortions who experience domestic violence, an assault, up to 3 times the rate of those who don't. So, who continue their pregnancies. So, it shows you that what drives the woman who goes through the abortion facility is always, I want you to kind of get this theme, a crisis, right? Some kind of crisis, poverty. They've been, they have discrimination in their life. They can't afford a child, literally can't afford one. And they're being abused. These are the type of women that largely have abortions. We tend to say, oh, it's not that bad, It's not really a big deal. Well, I can tell you when I was starving, it was a big deal to me. When I was hiding in the bathroom from my brothers who were abusing me, it was a big deal to me. That was real. That happened to me. Yet I can say that, and I can say 150%, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad I wasn't aborted. Those things can coexist in our conversation. So we have to find a way to do that.
For my mother, I know she felt alone in America, having no support system. And when it seemed like the abortion doctor cared about her, she felt vulnerable to that, even though he didn't care about her or me. It is my belief that by understanding these characteristics of abortion-minded women, we can try and get in their shoes and help find the methodology we need to advance life-saving alternatives to abortion, like adoption. Unfortunately, in the United States, for every 100 abortions that occur, there are only 2 adoption referrals that take place, revealing that adoption needs our help. I'll close by telling you this. My mother never escaped the cycle of poverty that she was stuck in. At the end of her life, she told me about her previous abortions, that she regretted those deeply, but that she never regretted fighting for my life. Let's work together to offer women real hope to the social dilemmas they face, real options when facing a crisis unplanned pregnancy, all while showing them compassion, rooted in the understanding of what makes them abortion vulnerable. I learned my pro-life foster care adoption story at a very young age, learning about my mother's decision to see an infamous abortionist from her, and then later finding out more pieces as time went on. I visited Dr. Tiller's abortion clinic in Wichita, Kansas in 2001 with my adopted mother. She was pushing me to go to the clinic, even though I wanted to go swimming. It was like 99 degrees in Wichita, Kansas at the time. It was summer, I was hot, I was 11, I was a kid. I wasn't interested necessarily in going praying at the clinic again. We had already been at a different clinic earlier that day. But she encouraged me to go anyway and to give it an hour. So we go, she holds her sign up, I had an abortion, please come talk to me. And unfortunately, her story is really sad too. She had an abortion in her 20s, and that ended up being her only natural pregnancy. But she was holding the sign, and as we're standing there, I'm seeing like this dirt fall on these white papers I'm holding. And I'm wondering, what is this stuff coming from the sky? It's hot, there's no rain. I was very confused as to what that was. And I poked my mom. I'm like, Mom, what is this? Why is my paper getting dirty? And she says, Sarah, that's the ashes from the babies that die inside. And I had this moment, this life-changing moment of I could have been resorted to nothing but ashes. Because you see, Dr. Tiller, he had a full-size crematorium on his grounds where he burned the babies that he killed in abortion. That story is very meaningful to me and stuck with me the rest of my life. And in high school, I read a lot about the Holocaust, and I realized how horrible the injustice of abortion was. Find out what you can do to help us end abortion and support adoption by visiting prolifelouisiana.org.